And on that note, another movie on Stan that didn't meet my expectations at all was Zac Efron's new movie Gold, which released on Australia Day. Have you sort of seen the trailer for it at all?
No, no. I think actually maybe I have. I remember seeing something with Zac Efron on Stan, and then just gonna click past it.
Yeah, I suspect you've probably seen it somewhere. Like they are pushing this movie really
Mm,
hard, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's purely just because Zac Efron's in it, and they assume
yeah.
people will watch it for that reason. But it's basically about two guys in the outback, and they discover this giant gold nugget in the ground, and then they need to work out, because they've only got a ute, how are we going to excavate this out of the ground and get it back to the town so we can actually make some money out of this. So what
Mm,
happens is the side character, that Zach's character, decides one of us has to stay here and protect the gold so that no one else comes and takes it and claims it. So
mm.
I'll go back to the town, get an excavator, and come back, and we'll dig it up and we'll be set. And then that's where the movie kind of falls off a cliff in terms of
Yeah.
interest level. So basically, Zach is left there to look after this gold with very limited water and food out in the middle of the desert. So it's hot, sunny, and he just starts to go a little bit stir crazy. And
Hmm.
yeah, it didn't quite live up to the expectations. Where I was expecting this really cool movie, and then it kind of takes this weird sci-fi twist at the end as well, where they don't lay it out at the beginning that this is meant to be sort of a post-apocalyptic world where everybody is struggling. But then at the end, that's kind of just thrown in out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, okay, that seemed a bit weird and out
Weird.
of place to put in there. I think I would have preferred
Yeah.
it if it was just basically him trying to survive in modern Australia. But nope, weird post-apocalyptic world. And then uh, Zach doesn't really have a lot of dialogue in the movie as well. I think his script was probably 2 pages worth of dialogue at most. There's hardly any dialogue. It's just sort of physical acting, which I'll give him props for. He does do a really great performance in this movie. Just the story was so thin in terms of what they try and convey about sort of
Mm.
essentially the perils of greed. So, spoiler, the end of the movie finishes with, it turns out that the guy that went back to get the excavator had got the excavator and come back, but didn't come all the way back. Kind of just stayed on the horizon with binoculars and watched until Zach
Waiting
dies.
for him to die.
Yep.
Oh, what an
And then he's
asshole. Well,
and then he
yeah.
goes in and takes the entire chunk of gold for himself. And
Yeah.
then
So
yeah,
Zach dies in the end.
yep. And like the makeup department, props to them as well. They do a really great job of sort of showing the impact of the harsh realities of being in
Hmm.
the desert for multiple, I think it goes over like 3 or 4 days where he's got virtually no water by the end of the second day. So he's really struggling, and he's just constantly
Uh,
sunburnt and like blistered. And
mm,
the makeup is
yeah.
great, but yeah, the
Exposure.
storyline was just kind of like, well, that was underwhelming. And the ending, I was kind of like, okay, well, that was an hour and a half of nothing really.
Hmm. Okay. I'm definitely not going to watch it then. So what's the sci-fi twist then? We've already established that Zach dies. I'm not going to watch this. So what's the weird sci-fi twist? Is it just that it's apocalyptic Australia? Is it set in Australia? It must be.
Kind of like they have, there's a couple of, you see a couple of Aboriginal people at the start, and the co-star, who is also the writer and director of the movie, Anthony Hayes, got an Australian accent. So it's kind of like Australia without them ever actually saying Australia. So it could just be sort of any
Okay.
random desert. But the sci-fi twist is a lady comes in, like stumbles across Zach, and her little dialogue part is about how uh, people in the city kind of exploited minerals and resources to the point where now everybody is basically living in this weird desert landscape world where everybody's struggling to get by. But there's a couple of people in the city that come out to the desert and try and exploit more minerals and just keep pushing it further and further without thinking of the impact that it's having on the world. And just
which is
it
also
felt really
very
out of
like
place. It was like, why did we just suddenly shoehorn this in?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of current though, like, indigenous, beautiful, thousands of years old indigenous artifacts getting blown up by, was it Rio Tinto? And, all of the, fracking and exploitation of the land that we have going on here. So it's probably worthwhile bringing up, but it sucks to hear that they didn't really do it very well.
Yeah, like I think there's a great nugget of an idea in the movie. It's just not executed well in terms of how the movie plays out in the end.
Is Zac supposed to be Australian? Like, does he do a really terrible Australian accent or a good Australian accent?
He's just Zac. They don't try and force an accent on him, thankfully. That would have made the movie
good. I'm glad
worse.
They don't do that. I did watch The Dressmaker. Actually, I watched half of The Dressmaker a few months ago, and Kate Winslet does a very convincing Australian accent because she's English or British. I'm actually not sure where she's from over there. But yeah, she has a really convincing Australian accent.
Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of Jamie Apps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/Jamie Apps Media. The following people supported at the community support group level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support. Blake Robinson, Brian and June Hart, Courtney Paulson, Darren Hackliff, Jackson Carr, and Tracy Apps.